You need to contribute more to this household, Arianna. The words sliced through the warm Thanksgiving air like a cold blade. My sister Jessica stood at the head of our parents' dining table, wine glass raised, her voice carrying to all 15 assembled guests. Family, friends, neighbors, everyone we'd known for years all staring at me now. I looked up from my plate, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Around me conversation died. Uncle Frank stopped mid-laugh. Aunt Claire's smile faded. Even the kids at the smaller table fell silent, sensing the tension. Instead of the anger or embarrassment Jessica clearly expected, I felt something else entirely. Calm. I'd known this moment was coming for weeks. I'd seen the resentment building in her eyes every time she visited, every family dinner, every casual comment about my life. I set down my fork carefully and met her gaze. I completely understand, I said, my voice steady. Relief flickered across her face. She'd expected tears, defensiveness, maybe even a scene. What she got was my small, knowing smile. Actually, I continued, reaching into my purse beside my chair, I think we should talk about contributions. My name is Arianna Torres, and until that moment I had been playing a very careful game. At 32 years old, I still lived in my childhood home with my parents, Rita and Carlos. To everyone who knew us, I was the daughter who never quite launched. The one who couldn't afford her own place. The freeloader, as Jessica so kindly put it. Jessica, my older sister by 4 years, had done everything right according to family expectations. Married at 25 to Grant, a pharmaceutical sales representative. 2 kids, Brandon and Sophie. A neat suburban house with a 2-car garage. She hosted book clubs and volunteered at the school. She was the success story. I, on the other hand, worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. I wore comfortable clothes instead of business suits. I didn't have a husband or kids. I lived with our aging parents in the same bedroom I'd grown up in, or so everyone thought. What nobody knew, not even my parents in the beginning, was that I had been quietly paying the mortgage on our family home for the past 3 years. It started when Dad's construction business took a hit during the recession. He never told us directly, but I noticed things. The way Mom started clipping coupons more carefully. How Dad's truck needed repairs he kept putting off. The tension in their voices during late-night conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. I was 29 then, and my graphic design business had just landed its first major contract with a tech startup in Austin. The money was substantial, more than I'd ever made. When I discovered through an accidentally opened piece of mail that my parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage, I made a decision. I called the bank, identified myself, and set up automatic payments from my business account. The mortgage was $2,100 monthly. I could handle it. What I couldn't handle was watching my parents lose the home they'd worked 30 years to build. But I never told them. Dad's pride would have killed him. He'd raised us to be independent, to stand on our own feet. Accepting money from his daughter would have crushed something in him. So I let them think the bank had granted them some kind of hardship extension. Jessica had always been competitive with me, even as children. When I made the honor roll, she studied harder to make Dean's List. When I won a design competition in high school, she dismissively called it arts and crafts. Her love was real, I never doubted that, but it came wrapped in layers of comparison and judgment. Her comments about my living situation had started small. Still at home? She'd ask at family gatherings, her tone carefully neutral but her meaning clear. Must be nice not having rent to worry about. Then, as months became years, the remarks grew sharper. 2 months before Thanksgiving, Jessica and Grant had visited for Sunday dinner. She'd walked through the house with this appraising look, touching the new kitchen curtains Mom had bought, noticing the fresh paint in the hallway. Mom and Dad are really keeping this place up nicely, she'd said. Must be easy when they don't have extra expenses. Her eyes had landed on me meaningfully. I'd smiled and said nothing. What she didn't know was that I'd paid for those curtains, that paint, and the new water heater last winter. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving had been tense. Jessica had called Mom repeatedly, suggesting that maybe it was time for me to find my own path. She'd even researched apartments in my budget range, which she'd wildly underestimated, and texted me listings with pointed messages. Mom had defended me, bless her, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She didn't want conflict between her daughters. Dad stayed out of it mostly, But I caught him watching me sometimes with a peculiar expression I couldn't quite read. Then 3 days before Thanksgiving, I'd received an email that changed everything. My tech startup client, the one I'd been working with for 3 years, was going public. As an early contractor with equity options I'd negotiated, I stood to gain a substantial windfall. My lawyer estimated somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million, depending on the IPO price. I'd sat in my bedroom, staring at that email, knowing that in a few months my financial situation would shift dramatically. But for now, I remained Jessica's cautionary tale. Back at the Thanksgiving table, I pulled a folded envelope from my purse. Around us, 15 faces watched with varying degrees of discomfort and curiosity. Mom's expression showed confusion mixed with concern. Dad had set down his knife, his full attention on me now. Jessica's confidence wavered slightly. "Arianna, let's not make a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I replied calmly. "You raised the topic of contributions. I think it's worth discussing properly." I stood, envelope in hand, and walked around the table to where my parents sat. Dad's weathered hands rested on the tablecloth, Mom's fingers intertwined with his. They'd built this life together, brick by brick, and nearly lost it through no fault of their own. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice clear and steady. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you 3 years ago." Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. "Arianna, what's this about?" I placed the envelope in front of them. "Open it, please." Mom's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the envelope, and I felt a pang of guilt for the worry I was causing. But this needed to happen now, in front of everyone, especially Jessica. Mom pulled out the papers I'd prepared. Bank statements, payment confirmations, all highlighted and organized. Her eyes scanned the first page, then widened. "Arianna, these are mortgage payments." "Yes," I confirmed. "Every single one for the past 3 years. 36 months of payments." Dad took the papers from Mom, his reading glasses already perched on his nose. I watched his face change as he absorbed the information. Confusion gave way to shock, then something that looked like pain. "You've been paying our mortgage?" His voice cracked slightly. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you wouldn't have let me," I said simply. "And you needed help, whether you'd admit it or not." Around the table, the silence had transformed from uncomfortable to stunned. Uncle Frank had his mouth open. Aunt Claire's hand covered her heart. My cousin Michelle was smiling, but Jessica had gone very pale. "That's not possible," Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Arianna doesn't have that kind of money. She's a freelance designer." I turned to face her fully. "I'm a freelance designer who's been the lead creative contractor for TechVista Solutions for 3 years. My annual income is $240,000. The number hung in the air like a revelation. I'd never told anyone my exact income, never flaunted it. I lived simply by choice, saving aggressively, investing carefully. My old college car still ran fine. I didn't need designer clothes or exotic vacations. What I needed was the security of knowing my parents wouldn't lose their home. $240,000? Jessica repeated weakly. She sank into her chair, Grant's hand moving to her shoulder. "But you live here, you don't." "I live here because I love Mom and Dad," I interrupted. "Because they're getting older and I like spending time with them. Because this house has space for my home office and I can walk to the good coffee shop downtown. Not because I can't afford to leave." Mom was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Mija, why didn't you say something?" "Because Dad needed to believe he was taking care of this family," I said gently, looking at my father. "Because I knew it would hurt your pride and I couldn't bear that. I'm sorry I wasn't honest, but I'm not sorry I helped." Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and for a moment I thought he might be angry. Then he pulled me into a tight embrace, his weathered contractor's hand strong on my back. "You're just like your mother," Dad whispered into my hair. "Too stubborn and too kind for your own good." When he released me, Mom took his place, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "We'll pay you back," she said fiercely. "Every penny." "Mom, no. That's not why I'm telling you this." "Rita, let the girl finish," Dad said, wiping his own eyes unselfconsciously. He gestured to Jessica. "I think there's more to this conversation." There was indeed. I returned to my seat, very aware of Jessica's stricken expression. I didn't want to humiliate my sister, but I needed her to understand how wrong she'd been, how her assumptions had colored everything. Jessica, I began, keeping my tone even, you've made comments about my contributions for 2 years now. Small digs at first, then bigger ones. Today you called me a freeloader in front of our entire family. I didn't mean, she started, but I held up a hand. Let me finish, please. You assumed because I lived here that I was taking advantage. You never asked about my work, my income, my choices. You just decided I was less successful than you. Grant shifted uncomfortably. He'd always been nice to me, but he'd never contradicted Jessica either. Beyond the mortgage, I continued, I've paid for the new roof last spring. $8,000. The HVAC repair 2 winters ago. $4,000. Mom's medication copays when her insurance changed. Dad's truck transmission. The property taxes when they came due early last year. I ticked each item off on my fingers. Uncle Frank whistled low. That's significant money, Arianna. It's family, I replied. That's what family does. We help each other without keeping score. I looked at Jessica meaningfully. Or at least we should. Jessica's face had progressed from pale to flushed. I didn't know, she said, her voice small. How could I have known? You could have asked, I said simply. Instead of assuming. Instead of judging. Aunt Claire spoke up from down the table. Jessica, honey, you should apologize. But Jessica wasn't quite ready for that. I could see the defensive walls going up, the same one she built as a child when caught in the wrong. It's not fair, she said, and I heard the little girl in her voice. You never told anyone. How was I supposed to know you were some secret millionaire? I'm not a millionaire, I corrected. Yet. That single word yet shifted something in the room. Dad caught it immediately, his eyes sharpening. Arianna, what aren't you telling us? This was the part I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I pulled out my phone and opened the email from my lawyer. TechVista is going public next month. As an early contractor, I negotiated equity options. Based on their projected IPO price, those options are worth between $800,000 and $1.2 million. The silence this time was absolute. Even the kids' table had gone quiet, sensing something big was happening in the adult world. Mom spoke first, her voice awed. $1 million? Potentially, yes. After taxes, probably closer to $600,000, but still substantial. I looked around the table at all these familiar faces, these people I'd known my entire life. I'm telling you now because I want to be transparent, and because I'm planning to use some of that money to set up a trust fund for Brandon and Sophie's college education. Jessica's head snapped up. What? Your kids, I said, meeting her eyes. My nephew and niece. I want to make sure they have opportunities no matter what happens. It's already arranged with my lawyer. $25,000 each, in education trusts they can access at 18. Tears were streaming down Jessica's face now, and not the angry kind. These were the tears of someone whose entire worldview had just shattered and reformed. Arianna, I can't. You can accept it, I said gently. The same way I need you to accept that I make my own choices about how I live my life. I'm happy here. I love my work. I don't measure success by how big my house is or whether I'm married. Grant was looking at me with new respect. We had no idea about any of this. I know. I kept it quiet deliberately. But Jessica's comments today forced my hand. I turned back to my sister. I'm not angry with you. I understand why you thought what you thought. But I need you to understand that your assumptions hurt me. For 2 years, every family gathering meant listening to subtle digs about my life choices. Jessica stood abruptly and came around the table. For a moment we just looked at each other. 2 sisters who'd grown up in this house, who'd shared rooms and secrets and dreams, who'd somehow lost sight of each other along the way. Then she wrapped her arms around me. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. We stood like that for a long moment, the Thanksgiving feast forgotten, while our family watched with various expressions of relief and emotion. When Jessica finally pulled back, her mascara was running but her smile was genuine. I've been jealous, she admitted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Jealous that you got to stay close to Mom and Dad. Jealous that you seemed so content while I was drowning in carpools and PTA meetings. I convinced myself you were lazy because it was easier than admitting I envied your freedom. The honesty in her words was painful but necessary. I squeezed her hands. Your life isn't less valuable because it's different from mine. You're an amazing mother. Brandon and Sophie are lucky to have you. But I made you feel small, she said, fresh tears starting. At every opportunity, I made you feel like you weren't enough. You did, I agreed, because sugarcoating wouldn't help either of us. But I also let you. I could have said something sooner. I chose privacy over defending myself, and that's on me too. Dad cleared his throat, his voice gruff with emotion. Well, this is the most interesting Thanksgiving we've had in 40 years of hosting. The tension broke. Laughter rippled around the table, relieved and genuine. Uncle Frank raised his wine glass. I'd like to propose a toast. To Arianna, who's been holding up this family without any of us knowing it. And to honest conversations even when they're hard. Everyone raised their glasses, including Jessica, who managed a watery smile. We drank and then Mom stood up. The turkey's getting cold, she announced, ever practical. And I didn't spend 6 hours cooking for us to eat a cold dinner. Everyone eat, please. The normal chaos of Thanksgiving gradually resumed, but it was different now. Lighter somehow. People kept glancing at me with new expressions: respect, curiosity, warmth. Aunt Claire asked about my design work with genuine interest. Uncle Frank wanted investment advice. Even the kids came over, with Brandon asking shyly if I could teach him to draw on the computer. Jessica stayed close to me for the rest of the meal, as if afraid I might disappear. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us was healing rather than hostile. After dinner, while others watched football in the living room, Jessica and I ended up in the kitchen helping Mom with dishes. It felt like old times, the three of us in this familiar space. I need to understand something, Jessica said, elbow deep in soapy water. Why did you really stay here? It wasn't just about the money, was it? I dried a serving platter carefully, considering my answer. No, it wasn't just money. When I first moved back after college, it was temporary. I was broke and building my business. But then I realized I liked being here. I liked having breakfast with Dad before he left for work. I liked Mom's company during the day. I liked coming home to people instead of an empty apartment. Most people our age want independence, Jessica said, not judgmentally but genuinely curious. I am independent, I countered. I run my own business. I manage my own finances. I make my own choices. Independence isn't about where you sleep at night. It's about having the freedom to design your life the way you want it. Mom smiled at us both. My smart girls, she said. Both of you. Different kinds of smart, but smart nonetheless. Jessica handed me another plate. When did you become so wise? Around the same time you became so judgmental, I teased gently. She winced but smiled. Too soon. No, it's fair. I earned that. We finished the dishes in companionable silence, and then Jessica surprised me by asking if we could talk privately. We ended up in my bedroom, which hadn't changed much since high school. My design setup took up one corner. Dual monitors, graphics tablet, ergonomic chair. But the rest was nostalgia. Band posters, old books, photos of friends who'd scattered across the country. Jessica sat on my bed, looking around with soft eyes. I forgot how much personality this room has. My house is all beige and cream. Resale value, she said, making air quotes. Like we're always preparing to leave. Is everything okay with you and Grant? I asked, sensing something beneath her words. She sighed deeply. We're fine. Good even. But Arianna, I'm exhausted. The kids, the house, trying to keep up appearances at everything. Sometimes I look at my life and wonder where I went. Jessica the person. Not Jessica the wife or Jessica the mother. Just me. I sat beside her, our shoulders touching like when we were kids and she'd come to my room after a bad dream. You're allowed to feel that way. I know. But admitting it feels like failure. Like I'm ungrateful for the life I have. She turned to look at me. When I saw you here, seemingly without a care, I projected all my frustration onto you. It was wrong. You weren't completely wrong, I admitted. I do have an easier life in some ways. No kids depending on me, no marriage to maintain. But that comes with its own questions. People assume something's wrong with me because I'm 32 and single. Family friends ask Mom if I'm okay. Like being unmarried is a disease. Jessica laughed softly. We both deal with other people's expectations, just different ones. Exactly. So maybe we should stop judging each other by those expectations and just accept that we're both doing our best. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I really am sorry, Arianna. Not just for today but for 2 years of comments. I was unkind and you didn't deserve it. I forgive you, I said simply. But Jess, you have to stop comparing our lives. What makes you happy won't make me happy and vice versa. That's not wrong. That's just being different people. I know. I do know that, intellectually. Emotionally is harder. She sat up and looked at me seriously. About the college fund for Brandon and Sophie, are you sure? That's incredibly generous, but I don't want you to feel obligated. I'm sure. They're good kids and I want to invest in their future. Consider it an aunt's privilege. The rest of Thanksgiving weekend passed in a blur of honest conversations and reconnection. Jessica and Grant stayed through Sunday, and we fell into an easy rhythm. Saturday morning, Jessica and I took the kids to the park while Grant helped Dad fix the fence. Saturday night, we all played board games, something we hadn't done in years. On Sunday morning before they left, Jessica pulled me aside one more time. I want to make this right between us. Really right, not just apologies. It is right, I assured her. We're okay. No, I mean I want to be the kind of sister who knows what's happening in your life. Who asks questions and listens to answers. Who supports your choices even when I don't understand them. She grabbed both my hands. Tell me about TechVista. Tell me about your work. I want to actually know. So I did. I told her about designing user interfaces for their flagship product, about the creative challenges and the satisfaction of solving problems visually. I showed her my portfolio, and she was genuinely impressed. We talked for over an hour, and it felt like discovering each other again after years of living parallel lives instead of connected ones. When they finally loaded up their car, Brandon and Sophie hugged me tightly. You're the coolest aunt ever, Sophie whispered. I want to be a designer like you. After Jessica's family left, the house felt simultaneously quieter and more peaceful. Mom and Dad and I sat at the kitchen table with afternoon coffee, finally ready to have the conversation we'd been dancing around. I'm still processing this, Dad admitted, his hands wrapped around his mug. 3 years, Arianna. 3 years you've been carrying this weight. It wasn't a weight, I said honestly. It was a privilege. You gave me everything growing up. A safe home, good education, unconditional love. This was my way of giving something back. But we're the parents, Mom said, echoing Dad's earlier pride. We're supposed to take care of you, not the other way around. I'm 32, Mom. I think the dynamic can shift a little. I smiled at them both. And you did take care of me. You let me live here rent-free while I built my business. You fed me, did my laundry until I insisted on doing it myself, gave me the space and support to take risks with my career. This was just balancing the scales. Dad shook his head slowly. You're something else, Mija. I don't know where you got this steel spine, but I'm damn proud of you. I got it from watching you, I said. You worked construction for 30 years, came home exhausted every night, and never once complained. You taught me what real work ethic looks like. We talked through the financial details. I showed them my business accounts, my investment portfolio, the careful planning I'd done. Dad was particularly interested in the TechVista equity situation. So this IPO, he said, studying the documents I'd printed out. This is real? This isn't some scam. It's real, Dad. I've had multiple lawyers review everything. TechVista is a legitimate company with solid products and strong market position. The IPO is scheduled for January 15th. Mom was less interested in the financial mechanics and more concerned about what came next. What will you do with that kind of money, Arianna? Will you finally move out? She tried to sound hopeful, but I heard the sadness underneath. Actually, I was thinking of staying, I said carefully. If you'll have me. Not because I can't afford to leave, but because I like living here. But I'd like to start paying rent a proper amount and I want to fund some renovations. The bathroom needs updating, and we should think about accessibility features for when you're older. Grab bars, a walk-in shower, that sort of thing. Dad opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. This is non-negotiable. Either you let me contribute fairly, or I'll buy the house from you and charge you rent. You're as stubborn as your mother, he muttered, but he was smiling. The following week, life returned to a new normal. Word spread through our extended family about what had happened at Thanksgiving, but the story that circulated was mostly positive. Arianna had been secretly helping her parents and Jessica had apologized for jumping to conclusions. The details about my income and the impending IPO windfall stayed private, known only to immediate family. Jessica called me Tuesday night. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble. "You should teach me about investing. I handle our family budget, but I don't really understand how to make money work for us long term. This was new territory for us." "I'd love to," I said, genuinely pleased. "When are you free?" We set up a weekly video call, just the two of us. It became our sister time, starting with investment basics but expanding to cover everything else. Our lives, our dreams, our frustrations. The competitive edge that had always colored our relationship softened into genuine friendship. In December, I had a series of meetings with my financial advisor and lawyers, preparing for the TechVista IPO. The projected value kept climbing. What had started as a maybe $800,000 situation was now looking more like $1.4 million. I was cautiously ecstatic but trying not to count chickens before they hatched. Christmas that year was different from any we'd had before. Better. Jessica and I bought Mom and Dad a 2-week cruise to Alaska, something they'd always dreamed about but never thought they could afford. Their faces when they opened the envelope with the booking confirmation made every difficult conversation worth it. Jessica pulled me aside while the kids were occupied with their new toys. "I got you something too," she said, handing me a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with 2 interlocking circles. "Sisters," she said simply. "Connected but independent." I saw it and thought of us. I put it on immediately, touched by the symbolism. "It's perfect. I also wanted to tell you something," she continued. "I talked to Grant about possibly going back to work part-time. Before I had kids, I was studying to be a nurse. I gave it up when I got pregnant with Brandon and I never questioned it. But watching you live so authentically made me realize I gave up something I loved without even trying to find a compromise." "What did Grant say?" "He was supportive. Surprised but supportive. We're looking into options." She smiled, but there was nervousness underneath. "It's scary thinking about going back to school at 36. "You know what's scarier?" I asked. "Looking back at 60 and wishing you'd tried." January 15th arrived cold and clear. The TechVista IPO launched at 9:30 in the morning. I sat at my desk in my childhood bedroom, watching the stock price on my monitor, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Dad had taken the day off work to sit with me. Mom kept bringing snacks neither of us could eat. By noon, the numbers had stabilized, and my financial advisor called with the final tally. $1.6 million before taxes. Approximately $1 million after. I stared at my screen, unable to quite process the number. It felt surreal, like something that happened to other people in movies, not to graphic designers in small southern cities. "Congratulations, Mija," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "You earned this." Mom hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. "I'm so proud of you. So proud." I called Jessica next. She screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Oh my God, Arianna. Oh my God. You're a millionaire. After taxes, Anne." "Shut up, you're a millionaire. We're celebrating. Big family dinner at our house this weekend. I'm cooking your favorite. No arguments." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Okay. Deal." That weekend celebration was everything I could have hoped for. Jessica had gone all out, decorating her house with congratulatory banners and preparing an elaborate meal. Brandon and Sophie had made me cards with crayon drawings of money bags and dollar signs. Grant gave me a firm handshake and a sincere congratulations. But the best moment came later, when the kids were in bed and the 4 of us adults sat in Jessica's living room with coffee and dessert. "I've been thinking," Jessica said, looking at Grant and then at me, "about what it means to support family. Arianna, you've been doing it quietly for years. I want to learn from that." "You don't need to," I started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. Mom and Dad's cruise is in March. While they're gone, I want to organize a family project. Painting their house, updating those landscaping beds Dad's been meaning to redo, maybe refinishing their hardwood floors. A surprise for when they get back. Grant nodded. I've already called Uncle Frank and Aunt Claire. They're in. We can make it a whole family effort. I felt tears prick my eyes. They would love that. And, Jessica continued, I want to apologize again publicly at the dinner table like I should have done at Thanksgiving. Jess, you don't have to. I do, she said firmly. You forgave me privately and I appreciate that. But I humiliated you publicly, and I need to make that right publicly too. March arrived with the promise of spring. Mom and Dad left for their Alaskan cruise, giddy as teenagers. The day after they flew out, 20 family members descended on their house with paint, tools, and determination. We worked for 3 days, transforming the tired exterior into something fresh and beautiful. Jessica directed operations with unexpected skill, organizing shifts and tasks. Uncle Frank handled the structural repairs. Aunt Claire led the painting crews. Even the kids helped, carefully painting the garden fence under supervision. On the final day, as we stood back admiring our work, Jessica put her arm around my shoulders. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For showing me what it really means to take care of family. For forgiving me. For being a better person than I was to you. I leaned into her, tired and paint-splattered and happy. We're sisters. That's what we do. When Mom and Dad returned, tanned and relaxed and full of stories about glaciers and whales, they cried at the transformation. The house looked like it had been lifted from the pages of a magazine, all fresh and bright and loved. That night at a family dinner celebrating their return, Jessica stood and raised her glass. I need to say something, she began, her voice clear and strong. Last Thanksgiving I said something cruel to Arianna in front of everyone. I called her a freeloader, judged her life choices, and assumed I knew her situation. I was completely wrong and I'm sorry. Arianna has been taking care of this family in ways none of us knew, and she did it without asking for recognition or praise. She's taught me about quiet strength and real generosity. I'm lucky to be her sister, and I promise to do better. Around the table everyone raised their glasses. To Arianna they chorused. But I was looking at Jessica, at her honest eyes and genuine smile, thinking about how we'd found our way back to each other. How truth, even painful truth, could heal. I raised my glass too. To family, I said. In all its complicated, beautiful glory.